Hi, this is Professor Chew. Welcome to the second week of the Classical World in Film. By now, I hope everyone has got a sense of what's involved in the course, the kinds of assignments we need to do. I know that there is still, some of you have just registered recently, still some issues with getting textbooks, seeing movies, and all those kinds of things. So, let me know what's going on. I'm very glad you're taking the class. If you have issues with deadlines and such, please get in touch with me as soon as possible, and we will figure it out. So I know this course is a little more complicated perhaps than some other online classes because in addition to getting the books and doing the work and watching my videos, you also have to watch the movies. And hopefully you were able to get a copy of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I am working on getting some of the movies streamed through the Rutgers Media Center. Not all of them can be viewed that way, but a few of them. So let me know what's going on. And this week we are continuing our study of Greek mythology in the movies by watching a film that is actually available entirely on YouTube. So all of you should be able to watch it from the comfort of your couch or desk. It's called Iphigenia, or Iphigenia. The film is by a Greek director. His name is Michael Kakonianis. And the film is in modern Greek with subtitles. The dialogue is very simple, though, as you'll see. To some extent, you might not even need to know too much about what is going on, what's being said. Now, the story of Iphigenia is it's actually something that happens before the events in the Odyssey. The Odyssey, of course, is about Odysseus coming home from the Trojan War. Iphigenia is about events that happen even before the Trojan War start. In fact, Iphigenia's fate is wound up in the whole start of the Trojan War. Iphigenia is the daughter of Agamemnon. Agamemnon is he's the king of Argos, which is in the Peloponnese, in the southern part of Greece. And he is the ruler. His name is the title of the play that we are reading for this week. It is the first play in a trilogy by the ancient Greek tragedian Aeschylus. And as you can see here, if you have gotten this copy of the Oresteia, which is the name of the trilogy of plays, there's a picture of General Douglas MacArthur returning triumphantly on the cover. What does that have to do with ancient Greek poetry, with the movie we're watching? Well, that remains to be seen. I do encourage you also, though, to get this copy of the Oresteia. You can read it online. This is available, I think, through an ebook, but it is a very good edition. And it also has a really helpful introduction about the history behind the play, about the myth, and about a lot of other themes. So I really encourage you to get it. It's not that expensive. My plug. So we're watching the movie, and we're also reading a play. Now, this play is actually not based on, the movie is actually not based on the play that we are reading. Kakonianis, he lived from 1921 to 2011. He was born on the island of Cyprus. He was British educated actually as a lawyer, but his call was always to the theater. He's also known for a very famous film called Zorba the Greek, starring Anthony Quinn and Alan Bates. And Irene Papas, a very famous Greek actress who appears in Iphigenia. Kakonianis actually directed, as I said, a trilogy of movies that were all based on plays by another Greek tragedian, Euripides. I have chosen the Oresteia and the Agamemnon to read, even for you, with this movie, because even though the Agamemnon is not about exactly the events that happened in Iphigenia, it is directly related to it. Iphigenia is about the Trojans trying to, the Greeks preparing to go to the Trojan War. As you know, the Trojan War was started because a prince of Troy named Paris kidnapped, sweet-talked, however you want to put it, Helen, who was the wife of the king of Sparta, Menelaus. and took Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, to Troy. Troy, by the way, is located in northern Turkey. So, Menelaus' brother was Agamemnon, and Agamemnon was the king of Argos. And Agamemnon raised a great army of Greeks to go and rescue Helen. However, before the army could cross the sea to get to Troy, they were foiled at a place called Aulis because there was no wind for their 1,000 ships to make the journey across the sea. However, the goddess Artemis told Agamemnon through the priest, Calchas, priest, that if he made a sacrifice, he would, the wind would start to blow again and all the ships could go to Troy. The sacrifice involves the daughter of Agamemnon's the sacrifice involves the slaughter, of Agamemnon's firstborn daughter, Iphigenia. And that's what this movie is all about. It is a 2-hour movie. It is in modern Greek. It is a little slow sometimes, I admit. However, what I really like about this movie, I think, is it really conveys something about the mythological feel of the ancient Greek myths. The movie is filmed, as you'll see, in a stark, sunny, and hot setting on the coast of a beach. The sets are, when you're watching it, take a really good look at the way the camera, goes back and forth. Sometimes you'll see these huge vistas of mountains or huge groups of soldiers waiting on the shore of the beach. Other times there'll be big close-ups of one actor's face. We see many shots of Iphigenia in anguish, Agamemnon in anguish, of Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra. So keep an eye on that. And also keep an eye on the director's use of color. It is a very visually, to me, commanding film. Again, though, it moves at a rather slow pace, and it is 2 hours long. But I think that it really gives a good feel of, sort of a visceral feel of what the myths involve. It is not a Hollywood movie. If you've seen the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, it's quite different from that. It's not slick at all. In some places, Kakanyani's used a handheld camera. The movie's also really of interest because I want you to think especially about, again, a reference to Agamemnon and the cover of this book, war. Of course, the Trojan War is the background to the movie. It's also the background to Aeschylus' play. And the Trojan War is the background really to much of ancient Greek and Roman literature. There's another war that was also in the mind of the director. Named at the time that this movie was made in 1977, and from 1967 to 1974, Greece was ruled by a right-wing military government. In 1967, a group of right-wing officers had seized the government at election time in a coup d'etat. Kakanyani himself took himself into exile in the years of the military rule, saying that if he'd spoken out, he would have been imprisoned. And actually, both the musician who makes the music for the movie and one of the actors, the actor who plays Agamemnon, they were actually briefly imprisoned in Greece for, in the case of the actor, for participating in a play which was counter to the, to the military dictatorship. So, this is a film about mythology. There's a big background behind it of modern Greek politics and of war. Also because in 1974, Turkey invaded Cyprus, which again is where Kakanyani's was from. And so there's a huge background, I think, to this film about war and really the effect of war on the victims and on people. And all of these themes also really come through in the Agamemnon. And not only that, but the Agamemnon is a play that was also written in the midst of wars in ancient Greece. Let's talk a little bit about ancient Greece. So, Aeschylus. Aeschylus is one of the 3 great tragedians of ancient Greece. He He is the oldest. They are Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. We will also be reading some plays by Euripides. Aeschylus was born in 525 BCE. Sophocles in 496, and Euripides in 485. And so these three men gave us an incredible amount of Greek literature, and that I wanted us to read some tragedy early in this class because, well, the performance of a play, of course, is very different from a modern movie. They're very closely linked. Even our word theater, for instance, is from an ancient Greek word theaomai, which means to see, to watch. The word cinema is from an ancient Greek word kino, which means to move, movement, like kinetics. So, a movie is a picture is moving on a screen. The ancient Greeks are always with us, I would say. And tragedy also was a central aspect of ancient Greek culture. The Greek tragedy's origins are unknown to us, speculated upon, researched upon, but Greek tragedy rose in the 7th to 6th century BCE. And seems to have originated from something called the dithyrambic chorus. Dithyrambic choruses. These were sung by revelers at festivals for the god Dionysus. Dionysus, of course, is the god of wine. He's also known as the god of tragedy. And in ancient Athens, what evolves is that every year there was a religious festival called the Greater Dionysia held in Athens. And at this festival, one of the things involved with this festival was actually the performance of tragedies in a poetic competition. A playwright like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides would write 3 plays and also something called a satyr play, more on that later. And these plays would be performed. They were elaborate productions involving the training of a chorus and of actors to sing and dance. All the actors in ancient Greek tragedies, ancient Greek performances were men. They also were masked. So I am going to put up a link to a video of a production of the Agamemnon in mass. And it's very, it's ghoulish if you watch it. It's not easy to watch, I think, for a modern audience. So just take a quick look at it. But you'll see the effect of wearing the masks has a really strange quality. In ways, it kind of either dehumanizes or it changes things. And it makes it rather eerie. If you've seen the Japanese form of kabuki, it reminds me a little bit of that. In other words, tragedy is performed at this poetic competition, but the one thing to always keep in mind is that tragedy is always associated with a religious festival in ancient Greece, again, with this festival of the Greater Dionysia. So Aeschylus performed the Aristeia. He wrote the Aristeia. It was performed in 48 BCE. Now this date is of note because for much of the 5th century, Athens was at war. First of all, Athens was involved in what are called the Persian Wars. We will be talking more about the Persian Wars and all this history a little bit later. But we know that Aeschylus himself fought in a famous battle, the Battle of Marathon, where the Greeks fought against the Persians. And in fact, Aeschylus' first play was actually called The Persians. This is the first, it's the oldest play extant that we have of Aeschylus, The Persians. It's an interesting play because unlike every other ancient Greek tragedy, it's based on historical events. So it's an interesting play. It actually only has 2 actors. That makes it very different from other Greek tragedies, all of which have 3 actors total, and the chorus. So the Greeks were victorious in the Persian Wars, which ended at the Battle of Plataea in 479. And then Athens became a dominant power in that time. However, Athens, even though it became a dominant power, other of the city-states in ancient Greece, including Athens' former ally, Sparta, were not happy about the Athens, as it were, sort of showing its muscle, even while running an ancient democratic government. And from 431 to 404, Athens and Sparta, Athens and its allies, and Sparta and Sparta's allies were engaged in what's called the Peloponnesian War. So this is 30 years of war in which the power, the balance of power shifted back and forth between Athens and Sparta, and ended ultimately in Athens having a huge and awful defeat and humiliation. But that's a little bit later in the class. What you need to know is that war was something that Aeschylus had both experienced, lived through, and was highly aware of, and of its results. And, this isn't a Greek history class. If you find this fascinating, I really encourage you to take a Greek history class. Ancient Greek history is fascinating. It's very complicated. It involves all kinds of, defeats and triumphs and glories, and it's very intricate, really fascinating stuff to know. But I want you to think while you're both reading the play and watching the movie, not only about the representation of myth, which we saw in O Brother, Where Art Thou, a certain kind of, taking stories from ancient myth and putting them into a modern setting. And keep in mind that even though we think of Athens in Aeschylus' time as being ancient Greek history, for Aeschylus, the Trojan stories were in many ways ancient too. Troy's, whatever the events of the Trojan War, whether or not they actually happened hundreds and hundreds of years before Aeschylus lived. So they were ancient to him. They were not recent events. And when you're both looking at the film and you're also reading the play even, think about how does a director or a playwright use, use current events, and how do they sort of seep into his presentation of the myth. Other things to keep in mind, both while you're watching the movie and as you're reading the play, is the use of color. You'll see, I think, the use of color is sparing but very vivid in Iphigenia, and it is central and vivid also in Aeschylus' language. Another thing you might keep an eye out for is animals. To a lesser extent, but there are an animal figures very prominently in Iphigenia at the start, and it's worth sort of noticing how the director conveys that. You'll also see in Kakougiannis' movie the figure of Odysseus, and as you'll see, he's Odysseus as a conniver, a schemer. He's not always Odysseus as a noble hero, as we saw him in the Odyssey. In that respect, he bears perhaps a little bit more resemblance to Everett from O Brother, Where Art Thou? So enjoy the film. Please stay in touch with me about concerns about deadlines, getting textbooks, accessing movies, etc. And have a great week.